Hello everyone, Delion Peter from the Geopolitical Mundial channel. Today we'll discuss some widely circulating news. Now, it's the big news of the moment, which is about the United States government having classified the PCC and the Comando Vermelho as terrorist organizations. I'm gonna try to make this video short, okay, but I know it won't end up being short. It's going to be long because I have a lot to say about this, and I know there will be people who are going to curse at me, okay? And anyway, right, bringing a more realistic point of view, outside the box of let's magically solve all the problems, is always something that upsets people, right? So let's go. Well, the United States labels the PCC and Comando Vermelho as terrorists. The United States Department of State announced Thursday it has designated Comando Vermelho and the PCC, Primeiro Comando da Capital, as specially designated global terrorists. The statement, signed by Secretary Marco Rubio, also says that the United States intends to designate both criminal groups as foreign terrorist organizations, starting June 5th. The Comando Vermelho and the PCC are two of the most violent criminal organizations in Brazil. Together, they command thousands of members and orchestrate brutal attacks against police officers, public authorities, and Brazilian civilians. Their influence and illicit networks extend far beyond Brazil's borders throughout our region and into our own country. According to the statement, the Trump administration will use all available tools to keep illicit drugs out of American territory, and to disrupt the flow of resources that finance violent narco-terrorists. The action taken today by the State Department further demonstrates the Trump administration's unwavering commitment to dismantling cartels and criminal organizations in our region and ensuring the safety of the American people, the announcement concluded. Both classifications result in asset freezes. Pay close attention to this, but they have some differences compared to the classification of specially designated global terrorists. Any transaction or dealing by persons in the United States or within the United States in property or interests in property that are blocked is prohibited, including making or receiving any contribution of funds, goods, or services to or for the benefit of individuals or entities affected by the designation as a foreign terrorist organization. It becomes illegal for a person in the United States or subject to the jurisdiction of the United States to knowingly provide material support or resources. Designated group. In addition, foreign members or representatives of a terrorist organization are prohibited from entering the United States and, in certain circumstances, may be deported. Flavio Bolsonaro says he asked Trump for classification. On Tuesday, Senator Flavio Bolsonaro stated that he asked the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to classify the Red Command and the PCC as terrorist organizations. On the same day, the presidential pre-candidate met with the American leader at the White House, according to Trump, who said he would consider the request. When President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva met with the head of state of the United States on May 7, he delivered a document with arguments against classifying the two groups as terrorists. But he told journalists that the topic was not discussed at the meeting. Last year, experts from Brazil's Ministry of Justice and Public Security had already met with representatives of the American government to discuss the matter. According to the guidelines of the Ministry of Justice, the Comando Vermelho and the Primeiro Comando da Capital could not be classified as terrorists under Brazilian law, because the actions of these factions do not involve hate crimes or religious crimes, but rather the pursuit of profit through arms and drug trafficking. All right, let me get back to this now. I can't go into detail because of time, okay? But technically, the way a terrorist organization operates, its structure, its operational capacity, there's no difference between a terrorist organization and a criminal organization. They operate in exactly the same way. What makes the difference then? In the literature, it's said that a terrorist organization has a political purpose as a group, while a criminal organization does not, right? It's not that simple in real life as literature says, but that's not the point, and that's not what we'll discuss today. The main issue here is this. The right keeps insisting, and I'm talking about the right, and I'll put that in big quotation marks because there are a lot of bums who claim to be right-wing. Actually, they're simply anti-PT because every speech, every stance is left-wing, okay? And even though they say they're right-wing, but let's go on. The big problem here is that the right has systematically, in recent years, fallen for the same old trick, always believing in some so-called silver bullet that's going to magically solve all the problems, a game changer that overnight will fix everything, okay? And it doesn't get to the core to the real issue of what needs to be done to solve the problem. And why? Because it doesn't go where it needs to go to truly solve the problem. Because it's hard work and it doesn't get votes, and right-wing politicians in Brazil basically don't want to put in the effort. They want to get votes from the gullible, so they pick hot-button topics that are very controversial, go on social media, post videos, post long texts to win, to get votes from the gullible people who are just cheering them on. Meanwhile, they stay there in the debate with the left's shock troops, who are the influencers or the lower-tier left-wing politicians in the debate. Meanwhile, the so-called upper echelon of the left is quietly changing the mechanisms, the system's mechanisms, in their favor. So now the magic bullet, the magic secret to solve the crime problems, because now it's going to be solved, is to put the United States against the criminal organizations. Look, they believe it. The Brazilian right believes that the country with the most drug consumers in the world, which exported the woke fentanyl agenda, encouraging, promoting, and idolizing drug use, whose CIA and State Department have systematically been involved with drug traffickers over decades. And this is not a conspiracy theory. We have public documents about this, okay? It's not a journalist's document or anything like that. We have documents from the American government itself, criminal cases from the American government itself, showing that systematically these organizations were involved with drug traffickers. Whether it's providing intelligence, offering logistics and helping with transportation, giving cover, or even granting amnesty for crimes in exchange for political gains. This is the nation that is now going to fight drug trafficking, whose president, Trump, is directly involved with money laundering and with Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. It's with this guy, with this country, that they're going to fight drug trafficking. There hasn't been a single place where the United States has acted, absolutely none, nowhere. Take the last damn 70 years, okay? Take the last damn 70 years. Wherever you had an American presence, did you have a fight against drug trafficking? Was there any place where you did? No, in every place where there was a systematic presence of the United States, what did you have? An increase in drug trafficking. Adriano, conspiracy theory. That's a documented fact. Show me a place where the United States fought drug trafficking. There isn't one anywhere American troops or the CIA had a presence. You immediately have a sharp increase in drug trafficking. Vietnam, Central America during the 80s, Colombia in the 90s, and so on. Afghanistan in the 2000s and 2010s. It's documented, guys, It's not some hearsay conspiracy theory. It's documented, it's in both government reports and in criminal proceedings from the United States government itself. This kind of thing is just absurd. Do you really think this government is going to defend Brazil against drug trafficking? For God's sake. And now, the right is all celebrating, because basically what the right does is dance to the tune that the left plays. Because basically the logic of the right in Brazil today is this. If the left, the PT, is against something, I'll take a stand in favor of it because it must be a good thing. And if the PT is in favor of something, I'll take a stand against it. After all, it must be a bad thing. It's the PT taking a stand for or against something that's setting the rules, the terms for the right. And that's when you don't have a wing of the right that simply appropriates left-wing rhetoric with the argument that it's a strategy to win votes. Because when I get to Congress, I'm going to do things differently, and they don't. So that's how it is now. The magic solution to end organized crime is to support classifying the PCC and Comando Vermelho as criminals, as terrorists. Did that help at all in Mexico? They directly labeled the Mexican cartels as terrorists. It didn't change absolutely anything, absolutely nothing. But no, it's not that we think it will magically solve things, but it's a start. No, it's not a start. It won't make any difference. This is much more of a mechanism to achieve other goals they've been wanting to reach for a long time. Right away, PICs, and especially the fuel networks that served as money laundering fronts for the PCC. Not all of them, obviously, but it's there, in the middle of it. But do you know what's worse? People have no idea about the scale. There are people saying, but then they're going to invade. It sounds like the United States is going to invade Brazil. No, they're not going to invade Brazil. But they're going to use this as a tool to pressure Brazil in certain sectors of theirs, okay, which will affect the economy because imagine this. Okay, what? That's the point a lot of people aren't getting. The United States comes to a Brazilian bank and says the following: if you want to keep operating in dollars with the United States, you're going to have to block all these accounts. Here. Then you say, okay, accounts linked to drug trafficking, fine, but here's the thing. Most likely you work for drug traffickers, and what if you don't? Your father or your mother or your uncle or your aunt or your brother, sister or your cousin or your son, your daughter, they probably work for them, but they don't know it. You know why? Because there are a lot of legitimate companies that are operating normally, making profits as usual, that mix at the top in the company's bank account legitimate money with drug trafficking money to launder money. Adriano, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that it gets taken down. Right. So here's what happens. This person, right? Why are the United States going to send someone there? These accounts have to be blocked if the bank wants to comply, because if the bank doesn't want to comply, sanctions will be imposed on the bank and the bank gets screwed. It's worth remembering that we only have 4 major banks in Brazil, right? The rest don't really matter. 80% of Brazil's economy is in the hands of Bradesco, Itaú, Banco do Brasil, and Santander. If you hit one of these banks, my son, if Banco Master, which was relatively small, already caused the trouble it did for the Credit Guarantee Fund, if you hit one of these 4 here, my friend, the Brazilian economy is screwed. You won't even have money to pay for the internet to access YouTube, okay? But anyway, they're going to send the list, block it. If you don't want to block it, we'll sanction the bank will obviously comply, and then what happens is the person will simply be unemployed overnight, just like that, okay? But you'll still get the severance pay, right? The assets in that account will be frozen. You won't be able to touch them. Goodbye to the FGTS, goodbye to the salary that was withheld from the last month, goodbye. The suppliers of that company will never get paid again. It just gets frozen. But you can't file it as a labor lawsuit, can you? Because you'll have to file it in the United States. You'll have to take legal action there, not here. The Brazilian judge will say, I can't unblock it because the bank blocked it due to a US legal order. Even if the judge wants to put pressure on the bank will appeal and will say, but we can't, because if we do, over there in the United States, they're the ones who will sanction us, okay? So that's the problem. It's going to affect such a large portion of the population that we don't even know how many people it will reach. Then some scoundrel will claim I'm defending organized crime, that I'm covering up for criminals. No right-wing scoundrel has had the courage to say what I say. For example, I openly support the death penalty for leaders of criminal organizations. I support a deep reform in the judiciary. I support a deep reform in all investigative mechanisms, including the public prosecutor's office. It's known some authorities have ties to organized crime, but how many on the right mention it? None. I even support, above all, cracking down on users. How many people on the right say that openly? None, because they're all scared, okay? I won't say none, but few. There are some, to be honest. Let's be honest, there are a few, but it's just a few, okay? And what's the issue here, right? Because then there was that journalist on Globo News talking, the price of cocaine went up, and then people were like, look, she's publicly admitting that she uses cocaine, she's defending it, she thinks it's absurd that the price of her cocaine went up. No, the problem is this. The main thing the right misses about drug trafficking is why they always fall for the left's trick. Here's the thing. The more you fight the producer and the trafficker, the more expensive the drug gets, because you take the drug off the streets, so the price goes up. What's the problem with the price going up? There's nothing wrong with it, it just becomes more attractive, profits go up, so the more you fight drug trafficking, the more money traffickers make. Why? Because it gets more expensive. Well, so should we just let it happen? Is that it? No, obviously you can't just let it happen, because if you ease up on fighting the producer and the trafficker, what happens? You increase their consumer market, more people will use it, etc., even if it's by diluting the drug, but more people will end up using it, so you expand the consumer market, which is terrible because we know the harmful consequences of drugs. So, no, what do? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Doing nothing, isn't that what you're advocating? No, do you know what you do? What did the countries that actually managed to fight drug trafficking do to solve it? They went after users. So I ask you, how many of those politicians, especially from the Law and Order caucus, openly defend fighting the consumer? Huh? Tell me, there are very few. Most of them do nothing, okay? And another thing, once again, the right wing believes in miraculous results. A hero who will come from space to save us, Superman. That's what the right wants in Brazil. They don't want to deal with issues that will take effort. Do you know what will take effort? None of the right-wing politicians are pushing this because they're soft and cowardly. You know what I mean? Judicial reform. How many politicians are openly talking about judicial reform? I've been warning people. If you go to my Facebook, you'll see that I've been warning about a judicial dictatorship since 2010 and 2011 and all these years, every year. Since that time, what I heard the most was that I was exaggerating. Until finally, Brazil's Supreme Court showed its claws starting in 2022, and then it was no longer a joke. From that point on, De Leon was no longer exaggerating. But anyway, right, it was already too late. Back then, I was already warning about the problem of having a caste with so much power, so much authority, that it supervised itself, regulated itself, and isolated itself from the population, being able to do whatever it wanted. But De Leon was exaggerating. So, how many people on the right are proposing a restructuring of the balance of power? It would harm almost no one. And by the way, mainly the people from the pro-gun caucus, or the military, or the police officers. Everyone's quiet, right? Because if you go on Instagram, on Twitter, those tough guys are there. The big guys, the police chiefs, the former cops, right? When they get there, I have a lot of police students, and I've already told them this. They go on Instagram and post pictures holding a rifle, wearing sunglasses. The guy even wears sunglasses at night, right? Like, you know the guy is really tough when he posts wearing sunglasses at night, because then he's really a badass, right? Those rifles with the vest that says police on it, right? Wow, look at that. Your testosterone jumps to 4,000, just skyrockets. These guys are super macho, right? If I confront those pro-gun caucus deputies, they're tough and will talk tough to me, you know? They might even hit me because I'm easy to go after. Now try going after the judiciary. They're all, keeping quiet, scared shitless, every one of them. And I'm not saying to do anything drastic to the judiciary. I'm proposing, saying that we need to do a legal reform to change what the judiciary is today. And on the right, no one has the courage, right? Including the Bolsonaro family, all scared, praising, it's worth remembering, Gilmar Mendes himself. It's written, so there's no point in running. Everyone stays quiet and no one's going to touch it. At the core of the issue, which is a deep reform of the judiciary, a deep reform of the penal code, the civil code, the code of criminal procedure, the code of civil procedure, there is no reform. What you have there is just window dressing, because these topics are boring. Most people don't want boring topics. They want to see what's generating debate at the moment. Because what's important is the hype. That's what's important. These boring technical topics, I don't care about them. They don't get views, and as a result, they won't get me votes, since I need to go viral. That's the logic behind right-wing politicians getting into debates, gaining public attention by going up against the left's shock troops. But do you know who's getting into this discussion? The boring people who do the tedious work, very quietly and discreetly. The left, backed by the big globalist, woke left-wing businessmen, Paulo Lemon, Moreira, Salles, Alforege. Them. This group is having a broad discussion and pushing for a reform of the judiciary, while the right hasn't gotten into this discussion about reforming the judiciary. Because they were afraid to talk about it out of fear of persecution from the judiciary. The left is acting in secrecy, in partnership with these globalists, and they are going to dictate the reforms of the judiciary. The right isn't joining this discussion and will only get involved when it's too late to do anything. And after the judiciary, this elite will go after the public prosecutor's offices. Don't be fooled. And the right will be making a lot of noise on the internet, making a lot of noise on Twitter, on Instagram with these discussions. So one thing that would make all the difference in the world is changing the structure of the judiciary in Brazil. Put responsibility on the judges, take away forced retirement. Here, for years we've been demanding this. The right isn't getting into these discussions. It's the left that's getting involved. The Supreme Court itself is doing it. Do you think the Supreme Court is changing the forced retirement issue? Because they're tired of the abuses of the judiciary, aren't they? The right doesn't even get into this discussion. They're having this debate thinking that miraculously the United States, the land of freedom, capitalism, and democracy, is going to magically solve our problem. As if the United States today in 2026 were the same United States as in the 70s, the 80s, or the 60s, right? As if it were those United States, because there's a huge disconnect from reality among the Brazilian right? The important thing is to get views and then play the same tune the left plays, sings, plays, and that's it, and we end up getting screwed. So instead of getting involved where it would make a difference, which was this judicial reform, so we could have a less activist judiciary, You keep thinking that miraculously the United States, which are actually the main driving force behind global drug trafficking, are going to fight drug trafficking in Brazil. These people are completely detached from reality, and there's no point rubbing it in their faces. They ignore what you say, and if or when they do, they might even agree with you. And after 15 minutes, they're there again, clapping their hands. But at least the Workers' Party isn't happy about it. Adelhau, are you defending them? I'm not defending drug trafficking. I've already said that, as far as I'm concerned, they should really crack down. They had to crack down. But we have to do this. Isn't it actually the nation that's partly behind this problem involved in it? But anyway, the right-wing perspective is bad because there's this geopolitical illiteracy, this realist illiteracy. Everything is about getting views, attracting attention, polarizing, without changing absolutely anything. Meanwhile, the left acts in a precise, targeted, and discreet way, reforming the system, and the right doesn't even know this is happening, doesn't even know. There's this fight going on behind the scenes over the judiciary involving even the, I wanted to say, globalists, and especially the banks, and the right doesn't even know this discussion is happening, but okay. Do you really believe that Trump, together with the CIA, together with the FBI, along with all those guys, the same ones who've been compromised for decades, are miraculously going to solve Brazil's problem? It's sad. Well, next week there will be some big news on the channel starting this Thursday, okay? Really big ones. I think it's the biggest change, let's say, to the channel since I started it in 2021. I think it was 2021. I hope you'll check out the major change coming to the channel, and most importantly, that you like it. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video.